See, we were talking about coal mining, but the story is depressingly similar to all mining in India. Coal mining, of course, has the largest footprint and potentially has the greatest impact on a very large number of people. I mean, greatest in terms of volume. But the story with respect to mining, which we know from other parts, which have also been studied, which was again echoed by people from the ground who were there at the press conference, is the story of rampant abuse of rights, from from the right to assemble and protest, from the right to dissent, from the right to seek information, from the right to pass resolutions in their own village councils. There's been quite a lot of systematic abuse of rights, and the abuse has come not from government, in this particular case, but it's come from corporations that have been granted these licenses. So it is clear that these corporations are not adhering to, for example, the UN principles for businesses when it comes to human rights. It is clear. I mean, while it's obvious that the corporations do not have the right, do not have the obligation to protect human rights, they certainly must respect them, which means at the very least they must have a mechanism for due diligence on human rights to make sure that there are no adverse impacts, or if the adverse impacts are there, they are mitigated properly. And at the next level, there must be mechanisms for grievance redressal, for example. If there were many instances when community members spoke of how corporate representatives promised them jobs and nothing came of it. So a whole range of issues that people seem to have grievances about, and it is obligatory on the part of businesses to have a proper policy as well as a proper grievance redressal mechanism. So it seems to me, if you look at it from the point of view of businesses, it seems to be quite a wide, rampant, depressingly repetitive story of rights violations.
So today you're focusing on coal mines. Give us an idea of the sort of conditions these workers find themselves in.
We're not talking about the workers in the mines, we're talking about the communities that are displaced by the mines, right? The workers in the mines is of course another story. We're talking about pre-mining. I mean, the unfortunate fact of mining is there are serious human rights impacts pre-mining, during mining and post-mining as well.
So what's the process? What happens if I'm a villager near a forest which is earmarked for a mining operation? What happens to my livelihood?
Well, I get my livelihood is threatened. Most often I'm thrown out of the land and I'm intimidated. If I raise my voice, I'm intimidated. My leaders are bought off. The same kind of crony capitalism that one is seeing at the high levels in terms of the coal scam in India and so on. The way that plays out on the ground is that there's intimidation of human rights defenders. There's a harassment through false charges. So the rampant abuse of their civil and political rights on one side, and when mining starts, then you have a whole set of issues around pollution, livelihoods destroyed, water sources destroyed, etc., etc. So pre-mining, there's an abuse of their civil and political rights, and there is very little adherence to law. The law in India already prescribes, depending on who you ask, we think it prescribes free, prior, informed consent, particularly of indigenous communities. But at the very least, it definitely speaks of free, prior, informed consultation, none of which are really panning out. So communities against their will, without being consulted, definitely without their consent, are being displaced and their civil rights violated, etc., etc. That's the sorry story of mining today.
And what? Give us an idea of the intimidation that you're talking about. Is this just in terms of verbal, or do people have their houses burnt down?
Yeah, the people, there have been cases of where activists have been shot at by unnamed people. In the local community, it's known that they have connections to the company involved. It's not uncommon for the police to register false charges. Sedition is a very important, a very interesting charge. It's an old colonial law that which the British government used to arrest Gandhi under, and that law is very often used to intimidate human rights defenders. So there's a range of intimidation from low level threatening to false charges and to actual violence that communities have had to face.
And how widespread is this around India? Every state, or does it change depending on where you are?
See, the level of intimidation might vary a little bit, but substantial intimidation, substantial abuse of the rights of human rights defenders across the mining belt. There's little doubt that there's lots of crony capitalism and corruption. The institutions of state have been co-opted by businesses to basically cut corners for them, and all of which have led to some fairly significant abuses.
And what do you want the government to do? It sounds like some of the laws could be enacted if they wanted to, or if they had the capacity. What more can be done?
See, the first thing is that the law must be implemented. That's the first thing. But of course, that begs the question of who would bell that bloody cat, right? So the law must be implemented, which means the institutions of state must be strengthened, and that's a long way away from being the case. But nonetheless, the law is there, and the nice thing about the law being there is one can take recourse to the courts. Despite weak institutions, one can still have access to some kind of rule of law and justice. On the other hand, businesses are also, let's say, have a long history of acting unlawfully in India. So businesses have different vulnerabilities. That is, for example, a company like Vedanta, right, has a shareholder investor community to answer to. Many of the companies involved in the mining sector in India have a similar situation. They have investors, shareholders, they have other stakeholders that they're answerable to, and they have a reputation risk. So we think two-track approach should be taken. One is to continue to press the government to enact stronger laws, but more importantly to implement the laws in letter and spirit. At the same time, put pressure on businesses through their own stakeholders to do their bit under what their obligations are with respect to human rights.
Last bit, because I know you've got to go. Briefly, Mr. Singh's turning up tomorrow. What's your message to him?
Our message to him simply is that inclusive growth, which he's constantly talking about, will not happen if the Indian government continues to treat human rights as a luxury, as something. I mean, the idea that we get rich first and then we'll worry about rights is fundamentally flawed. Only if people have rights can they actually participate in a development process. Yeah? So Mr. Singh, I'm sure the scholar that he is recognizes this, but it would be good to remind him that that rights are a starting point, not the end point. I mean, you don't develop so you have rights. You have rights so you can develop in an inclusive manner.
One very small point at the end. Do you think he actually knows about these abuses? Do you think it has actually got up that far?
Well, there have been some very spectacular cases. There was the case of this lady, Soni Sori. She's an Amnesty prisoner of conscience. She's a school teacher from Chhattisgarh who was accused of being a conduit between mining companies and the Maoists. So she was tortured in custody, and the police officer responsible for the torture got a President's Gallantry Award. And so Manmohan Singh definitely knows about some of the abuse. It's difficult to be a political leader in India, or even a concerned citizen in India, not know about these things. So it's not. And so along with Soni Sori, 2 corporate managers were arrested for the same crime, namely of bribing the Maoists. They are out on bail. Soni Sori is still in jail. So it'd be very difficult to believe that the leadership, including Dr. Singh personally, would not know of the situation. It's the way they think about it that's the problem. They think rights will come at the end.